Hey, everybody. Good to see you again. This is going to be a review of Chapter 7, Theories of Cognitive Development, in the Keenan text. So really what you're looking at is the fact that we're talking about cognition and who are the most prominent of the theorists in education. One of the most prominent is Piaget. And Jean Piaget was very adamant about what he believed in terms of children and how they are motivated activists. And in their own world, they have a way of constructing their understanding as they go out and explore. So if you think about what we talked about last chapter, in the physical development of infants and how they explore the world. Somewhat, if you look at that, think about Piaget and how he observed and made observations to the world in terms of kids. When you look at the Piagetian theory, it's a way in which children build their cognitive structures through schemes. In other words, through generalizations. And then they go out and sort of organize and adapt what their thought processes and further understanding of the world as they bring in new things into those schemas. The thing about this is, think about this always makes me smile. Think about this. Kids, for example, they built a schema about what a ball looks like, and it's round through their experiences. And what they do is that they typically then name everything that has a roundness to it a ball. You hear kids make those kinds of observations all the time. What happens is that then they create an equilibrium about their observation and experience. As things come into their world that disrupt that, their equilibrium becomes turned on its side, and they then learn that there are things that not necessarily have roundness that are not balls. So the arrow in this picture is pointing to the pregnant lady's belly. And so you're in town walking with your toddler, and they see this roundness of their belly, and they go to and look at the lady and they say ball. And you say, no, that's not a ball. She's pregnant. So there's this disequilibrium that's created through real world observation and experience, that then they have to create a new schema for that notion, for that experience, for that word. So you have to, as we go forward, create opportunities that will fundamentally change our schema and change our understanding of a concept. And that action, in other words, that creation of this new thing, is called accommodation. So in this picture, if you take a look at it, the old schema in which all things that had a roundness to them was ball. All of a sudden, kids start to update that schema, all right? And so ball becomes those three things in the middle on the right-hand side that are a soccer ball, a baseball, and a play ball. And other things that have roundness to it become other things. They're not balls. They're an orange, the roundness that we look at in the sun, an apple, the woman's pregnant belly. So really, with Piaget, his theory is really all about 4 specific stages of development. And this graphic gives you a really nice wrap up of what those are. And it's the sensory motor stage, the perceptual stage, the concrete operational stage, and the formal operational stage. And you can see that the ages are down in the left-hand corner of each of those photographs. So let's talk a little bit about each stage, because I think it's important for you to understand them a little bit more in depth. And again, your book goes into much more detail. But with Piaget in the sensory motor time, the first couple of years of a child's life, they are really you're looking at reflective responses to things in the environment. The major achievement in this stage, and again, this is according to Piaget, is the development of what they call object permanence. It's sort of the beginning of to think about how we use representations. By the end of this stage, children engage in pretend play, imaginary kinds of activities, and use real objects to stand for imagined objects. As children advance into toddlerhood and early childhood, the children's thinking is really characterized in terms of representational abilities. Those are specifically language, pictorial and spatial representation, and pretend play. The characteristic of egocentrism is fairly prominent. In other words, kids really can have a tendency to really only think in terms of their own perspective. And as they get older, after age 7, then there becomes this being able to take others' perspective in the world. It's also, this pre-operation stage is characteristic of attributing life-like qualities to inanimate objects. Think about different play with dolls, stuffed animals, things of that nature. It's an animistic kind of thinking. Sorry, not animalistic. The difficulty within this stage, or something that they don't have a really strong idea of being able to do, is this matter of conservation of matter or number. And that's, I think, really well shown in your book. As children get older, again, somewhere between 7 to about 11 years old, they use mental skills to understand, to classify hierarchies. And also, again, in the formal operation, kids get into concepts of abstract thinking, hypotheticals. So again, you look at the curriculum of how we create this development in education. You don't typically see with a very young child hypotheticals for a very young child, for example, 4-year-old. Some of the things, the follow-up research is has been out there and debunks a bit of where Piaget has presented childhood development and cognitive development. And research post Piaget has spoken to the fact that many of his tasks used too much information or unfamiliar elements, so that the child couldn't understand what the task was. Many things that occur naturally in childhood reasoning were sort of missed in his workings with kids, and oftentimes a preschooler's response to some of his tasks didn't really reflect their true ability because they were given tasks that were oversimplified. So there are researchers out there who have spoken up to the fact that they don't feel that Piaget really has given us the entire picture of what children can do, especially with this pre-operational thought. Somewhat the current thinking is that it's more continuous. Piaget really has presented sort of stages that you have to go through. And it's also the fact that the cultural influences that he did not take into account really play a much larger role in children's understanding of the world. Another researcher that, if he had lived a much longer life, would have given us such a rich concept of the theoretical construct of social cultural theory. Lev Vygotsky died at the age of 38, but his sociocultural theory really is something that stresses how our context of our society, our small groups in terms of family, those who interact with us on a regular basis, come to really have an impact on our cognitive development. He really talked about the origins of children's cognition within the context of social dialogues, and that the important part of our understanding of how we influence children is that they have dialogues with more knowledgeable individuals. Then children start to communicate with themselves in much the same way that this more knowledgeable other communicates with them. And this sort of generally enhances the complexity of their thinking. A concept that we discuss a lot in education and use in terms of our educational pedagogy is the zone of proximal development. And really what this is it's the difference in the child's actual development level and their potential through problem solving under adult guidance. In other words, if you're presented with a problem with a more knowledgeable other guiding you to the end game, that child will go from their current achievement level to beyond what their current level is. If you reach and use a problem that's too complex for them to understand, they will not be able to solve and understand that even with adult help or more knowledgeable other help, I should say. One of the things that's really important is for children to use self-directed speech when we talk about tasks that are challenging. In other words, when adults participate with children in social dialogues, and think about the interaction of from infancy all the way into elementary and middle school, these dialogues are really important because then the child has a model. The child then communicates with themselves in much the same way that they're being communicated with the other adult or more knowledgeable other. And that results ultimately in self-directed speech that becomes their inner speech. In other words, they're creating this ability to self-direct themselves within tasks within their own range of mastery, but within their ZPD. Another theory is information processing. And really what it does is it looks at the concept of the human mind and the computer. So this is kind of the analogy that was created, especially in the new age of computers 20 years ago or so. So there's some sort of a stimulus event at the top. Like noise, we attend to that. Our sensory memory, in other words, noticing, let's say music, it goes into short-term memory. It either goes into forgetting, the trash pile, or it goes into long-term memory where we can retrieve it. Most information processing theorists view that the mind is a system that manipulates symbols according to sort of a set of rules, again, like coding. It draws some parallels between human cognition and computers. So it's a theory that has several sort of structural characteristics to it that are important for us to really think about. Again, there's a sensory registry where the memory store, right? There's a working memory when thinking occurs, and that increases the capacity for us to take in larger pieces of information that come in chunks. And we convert that into some meaningful units to form complex mental representation. That sequencing then will go to the part of the cognitive system that creates permanent knowledge base or in the long-term memory. So the large takeaways from this particular chapter really are the focus on Piaget and how childhood interactions have an impact on cognition through the child's physical environment. Vygotsky has a stress in his theory of social interaction and with more knowledgeable members of their culture. And that's a critical part of a child's development. Information processing theorists emphasize the importance of the mechanisms that lead to developmental change. So they are three of probably the most significant theories that you should know as we go forward. And we will see you next time.